Hello, guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're doing another episode of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights. This will be part 152, so really getting on there. So these will be covering some of the wonderful mods people will be making and use them to talk about some of the wonderful biodiversity that we share our world with. So today we've got a very interesting assortment. We've got a couple extinct animals, a couple fish, a couple cool new exhibit animals, and we've got a New Zealand bird, which I'm always excited to talk about. So really keen to get stuck into this one. So we're going to be starting off. This was done by Scott and Leaf. We have got the red fang wandering spider. So let's have a look at the exhibit camera. So let's see if we can find one. Sorry if there's noises. It's kind of roadworks outside, but it is what it is. Let's have a look at you. No, you're not quite in the light. There you are. Look at this pretty one right here. Oh my gosh, he's so pretty. Anyway, let's have a look. So this is scientific name is Phylocentus hyastoma, which is the red-fanged wandering spider. I believe it's not actually described. It's like a locale that gets that red face, which is quite interesting. So these guys are a species of a spider in the family Centenidae, which includes like things like banana spiders or wandering spiders as well. And they are found in Guinea and possibly other West African countries. Little is known about their biology, but they can be found in trees and on the ground. And they are fast, agile, and high-strung, or very defensive. And there is some debate on whether their venom is medically significant, but people assume it is, because that's erring on the side of caution. And usually they'll give you like a dangerous animal so you can get certified and understand like this is a dangerous animal to have it when you buy it in the UK, for example. So this species is also sexually dimorphic. So mature males typically have a more muted body color, but they retain the red coloration on their chelicerates. So this is kind of this around here, their chelicerate. They're only for advanced hobbyists, and they grow between 4 to 4.5 inches in length span. So I believe that's like just about 10 centimeters or so. So they are, as I mentioned, a venomous species. They have medically significant venom, and it's typically only for researchers or advanced hobbyists, because you obviously don't want to put that risk. But yeah, we're going to have a look at a couple of the other. That's not what we want to look at. Look at the Zoopedia, see if we can find some other info. There's not too much info on this guy actually. Already mentioned that. What also makes this species remarkable is its unique way of hunting. So it's mainly nocturnal and moves skillfully to hunt for prey, and is characterized as being extremely agile and able to pursue and capture prey that includes insects and other smaller vertebrates quite quickly, which is quite cool. And unlike some other spider species that rely on complex webs, these guys do not build such structures. Instead, they like to hide in bark or hiding places like that. And also are quite territorial, so they defend their territory quite aggressively from potential intruders. So yeah, really cool. Definitely love these little spiders. I'm definitely a big fan. Nice to see some interesting animals in here. I don't think there's sexual dimorphism in the game, but it's still cool to have a good look at them. So, that was done by Scott and Leaf. Next up was done by Tosco DS. This is an animal I'm actually quite excited to talk about. So this is the Diane's bare-hearted glass frog, and we can see why. We'll have a look at its organs while we do that, because this is perfect to look at its organs. So this is Haliobractum Diane, which is known as Diane's bare-hearted glass frog, or Kermit's frog, as because of his appearance. These guys are a species of dart frog. I mean glass frog, not dart frog. So these guys are a species of Costa Rican glass frog, so they live in Costa Rica. And their colours, you can see they're quite lime green, a really nice, interesting colour. And why they get that name glass frog is because you can see they're almost transparent skin on their undersides. So you can kind of see their internal organs there. You can see it's like its heart and lungs and stomach and everything, which is kind of freaky, but really cool. But they're also quite uniform in colour and don't have any like real noticeable difference on them, which is quite interesting. They are also got silvery white irises, you can see, with dark spots, which led them to kind of be called the Kermit the Frog. They look like Kermit the Frog, so they've been called Kermit frogs sometimes. It's all right, quite cool though, because they have those kind-hearted eyes that look like Kermit. So you can't tell me that doesn't at least look like Kermit. Look at that. Look at the cute little guy. But I love that you can see the organs. It's so weird and interesting. So these guys are roughly 2.5 centimeters, or just under an inch long, and live in the rainforests of Costa Rica. They are found at elevations between 400 and 800 meters, typically, or 1,300 to 12,600 feet in the forests near the Caribbean coasts. And the known territory of the frog is mostly within protected conservation sites, and thus is actually under minimum threat of human activity. So they seem to be doing okay because we've protected most of the habitat. Let's have a look at another one that we can get a little better in the light. Look at this cool guy. Look at him. I love him. Anyway, they're typically distinguished from other members of this genus by their granular skin texture, its uniform color, and it has a very interesting advertisement call. So DNA confirms that it's quite a unique species with 12% divergence, but the one way it's told apart is its advertisement call. So it has a single tonal long metallic whistle-like note with a duration of 0.40 to 0.55 seconds and a dominant frequency of 3.5, 3.35 and 3.44 kilohertz. And it's actually believed to be why this species is undetected in previous surveys was because its calls are more like insects than those are typical frogs. So when you're out looking for frogs, you don't have the right equipment and it gets missed. But still really, really interesting that we know that much about them. These guys were discovered in the Talamoca Mountains in Costa Rica and described from 6 specimens there. They were announced by a bunch of cool people from the Costa Rican Amphibian Research Center in April 2015. And it's the 14th species of glass frog from Costa Rica and one of 149 other species of glass frogs. And Kribisi, who kind of like the owner, or kind of named it in honor of his mother, Janet Diane Kabosi, which is quite cool. So due to the frog's resemblance, as you can see, to Kermit, the discovery got a lot of attention. It was viral. And even Disney did an interview with Kermit, talked about the species, and like, googly eyes running our family, I'm Kermit the Frog, all that stuff. That kind of stuff. Commenting on the attention, though, actually the person that described it said he was surprised that he not noticed the resemblance to Kermit himself, but was glad it was getting the attention because it draws so much attention to the amazing amphibians living in Costa Rica and the rainforests and why we need to protect them. So a great conservation, message given through a funny-looking frog that looks like Kermit. So I always consider it a win, which is really, really cool. So next up, we're going to move on to a couple of other species. These are 2 different species of Tetra. Next up, we have got the neon Tetra by Patrus. I believe you say that, Patrus. Let's have a look. Let's have a cute little guy. So this is a neon Tetra. So the neon Tetra are a freshwater fish in the Charon family, or Charonidae, with the order Charitiformes, and the type species of this genus is native in backwater to clear water streams in the Amazon basin from South America. And you can see its bright colors make it quite visible to its conpacifics in the dark streams, and are actually quite popular in the aquarium hobby because if you've seen anywhere freshwater fish aquariums, these guys are mostly in them. And being the most widely kept tropical fish in the world, or at least one of them. So these guys in their native habitat are typically found in western to northern Amazon basin, in southeastern Colombia, eastern Peru, and western Brazil, and they like water temperatures between 20 to 28 degrees, or 68 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit, and a pH between 4 to 7.5. As a preference for acidic water, black water streams, but also occurs in transparent clear water systems, and not found in whitewater rivers. It's also been declared an introduced species in Singapore or the United States, but they consider this introduction both to be ecologically and socio-economically beneficial, but is not established there, which is interesting. So these guys, as you can see, they have a very interesting color to them. We'll see how close we can get. So these guys have a light blue back and over a silver white abdomen. And the fish are characterized by an iridescent blue horizontal stripe along each side of the fish, from its nose to the base of the adipose fin, an iridescent red stripe that begins at the middle of the body and extends posteriorly to the base of the caudal fin. So you can see the caudal fin's the one at the back there. You can see that stripe goes from there to the back. They're also partially transparent, that includes the fins, except for its markings, and sexual dimorphism is slight, though females have slightly larger bellies, and bent iridescent stripe rather than males just having a straight stripe. Though during the night, they actually become, instead of being blue and red, they become grey or black as they rest, and then reactivate their colours in the morning, which is really interesting. And this is because the neon tetras have an ability to actually change the color of its iridescent stripes in response to lighting conditions. So its a light adapted state, it's blue-green, and its dark adapted state, it's indigo, and it's believed to be because it's got crystals in their cells that actually reflect these lights, which is really cool. And they grow in about 4 centimeters, or about 1.5 inches in overall length. So in terms of their economics, so they were first imported from South America by the renowned ichthyologist George S. Myers in 1936, and named after Winston T. Innes. These guys are one of the most popular aquarium fish in the world. There's about 2 million sold in the US each month, though most are imported from Southeast Asia, but there is some wild collected. And during a single month, the average of 1.8 million tetras are estimated at the value of $175,000 are imported for the aquarium trade. And there are some commercial farms that breed them experimentally, but captive breeding on a commercial scale is pretty much non-existent in the US. It's a little bit sad. I mean, a little bit, but as I mentioned in the wild, they're like very soft acidic waters and have a lifespan that could be as long as 10 years, but normally just 2 to 3 in aquariums, probably because of stress and other things like that. A lot of people don't know how hard it is to take care of fish. It actually can be quite difficult. Let's see if we can find them in the water, because we don't want to see them walking around, do we? Look at you. Look at that one there. Look at this little guy, little gooper. Anyway, they are a shoaling fish, and they need to be kept in groups of at least 6, but will be more active in groups of 12 or more. And they're best kept in densely planted tanks, with a tank getting between at least 10 US gallons or 38 liters, with a temperature range, as I mentioned, between 22 to 24 and a pH between 6.7. So that's kind of what they like. In terms of their wild diet, they are omnivores, so they'll eat pretty much anything small they can get their mouths around. But in captivity, they'll feed on flake foods, brine shrimps, tubifex, bloodworms, also frozen foods like frozen bloodworms can add variety to their diets. And a lot of these can actually help with their color too. In terms of breeding, as I mentioned, they're kind of difficult to breed in home aquariums, though it is becoming more common, which is quite interesting. So the males are slender and their blue lines are straighter, as I mentioned. However, they're actually sometimes a plumpness maybe because of the lines she's carrying. And the neon tetra can also appear slight plump because they haven't overeaten. They typically need dim lighting, DH less than 1, and a 5.5 temperature or 24 degrees to breed. They also need lots of tannins in the water to breed, and are old enough to breed after 12 weeks. So tannins are kind of things, like leaves and stuff that makes, water go brown. Lots of tannins and things like that when you put lots of leaves in them. But there are a few related species, and we'll get into one of them now. So this was also done by Patrus. We've got a very interesting relative going on here. So here we have got the Cardinal Tetra, which I'm quite excited to talk about. So let's see if we can find you. This is the adult. Yeah, this is an adult. So this is the Cardinal Tetra. So quite a close relative. These guys are found in the Orinoco and Negro rivers in South America. So these guys were first described by American ichthyologist Leonard Peter Schwartz by the Cardinal Tetra in 1956. And the species kind of exists in another form of different colors. There's a gold and silver blonde form that lives in the Rio Negro, and the normal form is this one, and there's sometimes considered subspecies, but there's a different variety in their colors. But in terms of their description, these guys are bright red ventral parts, very similar to neons and iridescent root line. The main way you tell them apart is the line of red goes all the way to their front, as you can kind of see here. Instead of stopping in the middle, it goes all the way to the front. And it's a structural color, very similar to neons. They're able to change it, which is interesting. And the exact shade of blue is actually depending on the viewing angle of the fish, which is quite interesting. So it can change colors or hues and even become indigo as you're looking at the fish. And even changes in viewpoint ever can make it look more greenish. And they actually grow larger in captivity than they do in the wild. And they have a large stomach but a small gut, which is quite interesting. As I mentioned, they like to live in the upper Orinoco and Negro rivers, Colombia, Venezuela, Brazil. These guys typically like slow-moving shallow waters and are predominantly predatory, feeding on tiny animals found in underwater plants, roots, and leaf litters, things like midges, water fleas, and all sorts of really small animals, fly larvae. Anything that's small enough, they'll eat pretty much. So in terms of their breeding and lifespan, the Cardinal Tetra will swim upstream in the wild in large numbers in part of its range, a native river range that's completely covered in forests. rainforest canopy, so it's heavily shaded and there's virtually no sunlight. Here they'll spawn at large aggregations, and if the female is ready to spawn, the male, which is slimmer, will kind of come up to the female and kind of, pursues her, and then essence of ripe eggs, and then if the female's ready, she allows the male to swim by her, and then she'll lay her eggs, and then they can spawn. And this fish may actually be an annual species, so they might actually just live, breed, and then die, or live for just a single year, but in captivity they can live for several years. For them seeking to breed in the aquarium, the best thing to do is mimic this natural setup, and a study actually conducted showed that these guys, Tetras, can subjected transfers to water conditions for 96 hours, and they fish perished in low temperatures of 19 degrees and as high as 30-37, and they like a pH between 2.9 and above 8.8. So that's quite interesting. Really, really cool little guys. I know you see them walking around on land. A little bit weird, but still cool. Nice to have two species that we can talk about closely related. So this again was done by Patrus, or Bartosus, is how you say it. It's Bartosus. That's how you spell it. So yeah, really, really awesome. So we're going to move on to another Great Cakes mod. I know everyone loves Great Cakes mods. We're going to have a look at this one. This is Epihydrodon. So Epihydrodon, Epihydrodon, I believe you say that, Epihydrodon. So Epihydrodon is a very, very interesting animal. It is an extinct genus of mustelids known from Africa, Pakistan, and India that lived from the late Miocene right up to the early Pleistocene. And there's 9 confirmed species and a couple other species that are either undescribed or debated. But these guys are kind of related to the otter subfamily. And their name means otter tooth. Epihydrodon means otter tooth, as they are quite similar, as the dentition is very similar to the sea otter, even though they're not that closely related, which is quite interesting. So there's a variety of different species that lived all around the world, basically from India, Pakistan, and Africa. Some of them got really big, some were smaller. So this species, Omameus, is the largest. So some species were kind of like similar in size to that of sea otters, but the largest one, this guy here, Omameus, actually got to the size of a lion, so about 200 kilograms. So really, really big, which is really quite cool. So they were first found in 1868 by Hugh Falconer, who found them in the Sutterwalk Hills that grabbed Epihydron sylvanensis, which is the species that is the type species in the first one found, based pretty much off teeth and not too much else. There was relationships that figured out where they are related because they were thought to be a branch related to the sea otters of crab-eating otters, but turns out they're actually not that closely related. They're just convergently evolved that brunodont, or big round teeth for crunching hard things. That's just a great example of convergent evolution, which is quite interesting. And there has been some species described since then, with Omameus actually being the latest one. So this one is actually described in September 2022. So this one is been referred as the oldest one. So in September 2022, this is the biggest one. So that's the biggest, most recent one, kind of the latest one as well. Lived around the late Miocene, early Pleistocene. Really, really interesting. So in terms of body size, as I mentioned, they are up there with some of the large. They are definitely the largest known mustelids, but a few different species, as I mentioned. The two species in India got to about like 22 to 25 kilograms, which is interesting, like around wolf size. Africa's ones got much bigger. There were some species like Epihydrodon that got like 100 kilograms. A donkey got about 100 kilograms. And then this species, Omameus, got his weight even more than 200 kilograms, 440 pounds. That made it comparable, even heavier than other species of Epihydrodon and modern lions. So this is a lion-sized otter that is potentially the largest mustelid to ever exist, which is quite interesting. In terms of skulls, we don't have skulls from this species, but they are known, a couple different species known from skulls that have quite kind of squat, big, broad muzzles, probably adapted for eating quite hard prey, which is quite interesting. And in terms of dentition, as I mentioned, it's well defined by its very brunodont, very broad carnassials, which are the big teeth that pretty much all carnivores or carnivorans have to allow them to better break into things. So it's quite similar to almost like hyenas in some regards. So it's really, really interesting. So they have very, very big brunodont teeth, well adapted for crushing. Really, really good. But some species we know more than others because obviously they're quite fragmentary. So they're the largest, the latest appearing genus to suggest that they have more monodont teeth, and there's some other genera that's quite similar, but other species. In terms of its limbs, actually, Omaensis is actually known from a single left complete femur, with a short neck and a round head, which is quite interesting. So it's actually one of the few known from post-cranial material, which is cool. And in terms of its ecology, there's actually been a little bit of research into ecology. It was originally interpreted as being specialized for eating shellfish, very much like modern sea otters. But it turns out they may have been, even in Africa, they may have actually been doing a little bit more generalist. So they've been looking at isotope studies as well. So these guys likely would have eaten a lot of different things. So anything probably around the water's edge. Other species would have been a little bit more specialized for freshwater, eating things like catfish, crabs, ostrich eggs, baby crocodiles, ostrich eggs, turtles, things like that. They could have been eating around. But some later species, Omameus, is actually, they did a study on its isotopes. So this species was actually a little bit different in terms of its other species of otters. So these guys, they looked at the isotopes, compared them to things such as felids, bovids, hyenids, things like the spotted hyena, brown hyena, things like that, and hippopotamus. And actually showed these guys actually had significantly lower isotope deviations compared to terrestrial carnivores. So typically if an animal lives near water, it typically has lower oxygen isotopes deviations, but they actually found they had a similar kind of deviation to a sea otter and a northern river otter, believed to be Omameus, and getting fell outside that deviation, and actually found to be closer in line itself with the range of extant terrestrial carnivores, such as hyenas and, as I mentioned, hyenids and felids. So these guys may have been preying a lot more on, been on land a lot more, not quite as semi-aquatic as originally interpreted, and potentially hunting larger prey, so eating a lot of, large birds, large reptiles, large mammals, things like that. So a bit more generalist in that regard. So it's quite interesting. Would have been out on land a lot more. Well, look at these cute little guys. Let's have a look at the baby. Why not? So that's look into the ecology. That's really, really interesting. So as I mentioned, there were two species in Pakistan and India, falconi and sylviensis. They lived with all sorts of really cool animals like hyenodonts and other mustelids and amphicyonids, so bear dogs. Also, Africa and India, they had like gomphotheres, rhinos, calicotheres, hominids, things like that, and like the Pleistocene age. The African species Omameus is known from Ethiopia and the lower Omo Valley, and these guys are part of the Hadar Formation. They had the Ethiopian Tarkin living there as well, but you also had Australopithecus afarensis, which is believed to be a human ancestor, would have had Lucy. A lot of the actually very similar animals we would have had today. So it would have been a lot more woodland, but a little bit less savanna. There was kind of a little bit more woodland type. But they would have had a lot of the very similar ancestors of species we know today. Lots of like antelope and giraffe and things like that. But we also had things like, of course, more horses and rhinos and viverids and hyenas. So animals quite similar today, but we also had the extras like Dinotheres, Australopithecus, some really, really cool animals. But yeah, so yeah, really cool to talk about these guys. I love these otters, and it's an animal that's actually kind of underrated. But yeah, really, really awesome. So we're going to let you off to do your thing. Another great cakes mod. So next up, we're going to have a look at Patrus, a very, very interesting animal. So this is done by your old friend TNT and Leaf. We always love TNT. He always makes really awesome mods. Definitely a big fan. So this is Patrus, which is the father of cats. It's what his genus name means. It's a species of large cat-like predator in the is a placental mammal, so they give birth to live young, in the extinct subfamily Oxyonidae and the extinct family Oxyonidae. So Oxyonidae are actually called sharp hyenas. So they're originally classed as a cetodont or a creodont, which is an early group of carnivorous mammals that were unrelated to our modern carnivorous mammals that were quite common during the Eocene and like Paleogene and things like that, before our modern mammals, modern carnivores kind of really rose. These guys are actually now considered to be within Pancarnivora. So they are closely as so Fenray or Pancarnivora includes all your modern carnivores like seals, sea lions, bears, dogs and cats, civets, things like that, all those things. And then you have the pangolin, which is actually sister or the closest relative to that group of carnivorans. So these guys would have basically been as closely related to a pangolin, those are really, really interesting pinecone anteaters, to they are to all the cool, modern like lions and tigers and bears and things like that, which is quite interesting. So they were quite a wide group, and they first appeared in the late Paleogene of North America, but then spread out to Europe and Asia. So there's quite a few species known, definitely, probably more than a few, but Patrus is quite an interesting one. So this guy lived into North America in the Middle Eocene, early to Middle Eocene, from about 50 to 39 million years ago. So it was about 1.2 to 1.8 meters, or 3.9 to 5.9 feet long, not including the tail, and weighed about 40 to 90 kilograms, making it about the same size as a modern cougar, which is quite cool. It has short legs, as you can see here, and quite broad feet, suggesting it may have been a poor runner, but actually would have been quite a good swimmer. And a close relative as well has been noted to be quite a good climber. So these guys are probably climb as well, as you can definitely see here. So good swimmer, good climber as well. Probably similar ecology to something like a jaguar. That would probably be in a good comparison. So a big semi-aquatic or... I think just jaguar is probably a good comparison for the ecology. And they are found in the Bridger Basin in southwestern Wyoming and the John Day Formation National Monument, Oregon. So they're both found in the United States. And we'll actually have a little bit look at the Zoopedia. So you can converge it with jaguars and cougars, so they were quite good for swimming, eating all sorts of things. Father of cats, he's mentioned closely related to pangolin. They seem to, that's technical stuff. As first described, it's thought to be a species of feline, though it's actually part to be distinct grouped. That's cool as well. The broad paws indicate they would be walking riverbanks, and they were the largest Oxyelodon in their habitat, competing hyenodonts and mesocaids with another group of interesting carnivores. But their vastly different body types show that they were doing different things, so there was lots of niche partitioning, and they only would have competed rarely. But yeah, really, really cool. The father of cats, Patrus, really, really cool. Awesome. So, last but certainly not least, we've got another great cakes mod. And as I mentioned, this is a New Zealand bird. We have got here the Fior. So this is the Fior. Let's have a look at these wonderful guys. So the Fior, also known as the blue duck. The Māori name is blue duck. The Māori name is Fior, but the common English name is the blue duck. Hymenlaeus malacarinus is a species in the duck, goose, and swan family of Anatidae, and it's only found in New Zealand. And the only member of their genus, and their taxonomic relationships are kind of not solved, but they're closely related, believed to be, to the dabbling ducks. And they're actually, if you guys have ever been to New Zealand or seen a New Zealand coin, this will be the species you'll see on the $10 note. So if you ever have a New Zealand $10 note, you'll know that's a Fior right there. So they were first found, Captain James Cook saw one in the Dusky Sound in New Zealand, and then in the second voyage to the South Pacific, and then both in 1777, both Cook and George Foster managed to find it in separate accounts, and then a specimen was actually described in 1785, and was named, the binomial name was originally Anas macularinus, but it was actually split into its own genus. So the genus name means skin membrane, and laminos means throat, and then malacarinus, which means soft bill. So it's a soft throat, basically skin, throat, soft bill, because you can see on their bill there, they've got a little bit of a soft, bit there that they use to feel around for invertebrates and things like that, which is quite cool. So the species actually has no close relatives, and its taxonomic relationships are uncertain, though it's thought to be, as DNA shows, closely related to South American dabbling ducks, though it had been thought to be related to shell ducks, which is quite interesting. So its common name in New Zealand English is a blue duck, but its Māori name is Fior, said like Fior, which is onomatopoeic, so basically it's how it sounds. So males actually create a whistle-like call that where it gets the name Fjord, which is quite interesting. But the other names is either mountain duck or the blue mountain duck. And until recently, there was considered only one. There were only just the one, but now there's considered two subspecies. So as of 2022, the North and South Island were considered distinct, regions. So they didn't in captivity. They wouldn't breed North and South Island blue ducks. But now they're actually considered distinct subspecies based on genetic divergence and plumage differences, which is quite interesting. So in terms of their size or description, these guys are about 53 centimeters, or about 21 inches long, and vary from weight by sex. And females are smaller than males, weighing about 680 to 870 grams, or 24 to 31 ounces, whether the males get to 820 to 970 grams, or 29 to 34 ounces. And you can see they've got quite a dark slate kind of grey plumage with a greenish sheen on their head. And a chestnut, you can see flecked kind of chest there. You can see all the little bits of like brown on it. The outer secondaries are tipped with white, and the inners have black margins. And the plumage of the two sexes is pretty much the same, although females have slightly less chestnut. And the pinkish white bill, you can see it's pinkish white. They also have this little bit of like flaps of skin hanging on the side of their tips, and so they use that to feel around for invertebrates and things like that. And the beak in actually babies is green as hatching, and it gets its final color 8 hours after hatching, so that's quite interesting as well. But yeah, at work we have a couple of these guys, so I actually just fed them today. Really, really cool guys. They love their mealworms. They're really, really cute. I love hanging around with them. Such cool animals. Anyway, so the males and females actually have two different calls. Males have like a high-pitched whistle where they get the name Fjord from. So Fjord is from Māori, so they go Fjord, Fjord, and it's like, oh, that's actually their name. Works out well. And the female call is like a rattling growl or like a low-pitched grating noise. So that's kind of different there. So these guys are endemic to New Zealand, or they found there, and they typically nest in hollow logs, shallow caves, and other sheltered spots. And it's quite a rare duck, sadly. They hold territories. But they're rare for a few reasons, but we'll get into. They like a specific habitat, so they only like fast-flowing water, so they like hanging around the mountains where there's lots of fast-flowing water, where they can find a lot of those invertebrates. That's what they call the torrent duck, and they're only one of 4 species of torrent duck in the world, so they only like living around fast-flowing rapids and water like that, fast-flowing water. And because they live in fast-flowing water, they're quite powerful swimmers, and they can swim quite well in strong currents, but are reluctant to fly. But they are difficult to find, but not particularly wary when located. So, as I mentioned, their diet, they are particularly almost entirely feed on invertebrate larvae. So studies actually show that they fed a lot on midges and cadfly larvae, but they pretty much eat anything small enough, any small invertebrates. But they will also eat on occasion fruits and berries, and they do take things like mealworms and teal diet as well, so they're not too bad to raise in captivity. In terms of their breeding, though, these guys, we'll have a look at the baby while we talk about the breeding. So these cute little guys, these cute little babies, typically, they nest between August to October, laying 4 to 9 creamy white eggs, and female will sit on the egg for about 31 to 32 days, and the chicks were able to fly, or they fledge at about 70 days. So nesting and egg incubation of 4 to 7 eggs is undertaken by the female, while the males they guard. Nests are quite shallow, typically in twigs, grasses, and downlines and caves, they kind of like those, or underside river vegetation in log jams. And they're actually quite prone to flooding in spring. So this is why often their breeding success can be quite variable depending on one year. There might be a lot of floods, so it can be quite an impact to them. So in terms of captivity, so they've been held in both islands of New Zealand. As I mentioned, where I work, we have them. But because they are now considered different populations, now considered different subspecies, they don't mix North and South Island blue ducks at all. So that doesn't protect the purity. So they're managed very differently. And all places that keep them in captivity, raise them to release into the wild. They are part of National Recovery Program. So the FEO Recovery Program actually works with captivity, but also they will actually have special trained dogs to locate nests and then take those eggs and then release them and raise them in captivity and hatch them and raise them. And then later they are conditioned to be released, or they'll be kept in captivity to add new genetics to release. So that's quite interesting. And they actually were presented in the International Waterfowl Association in the UK by the 1970s, along with New Zealand shovelers, scorps, and brown teal, and by the Wildlife Service of New Zealand. And they actually were maintained and bred in the UK until 2012, before they died out because of the two last male ducks having becoming a same-sex pair, and they wanted to be with each other instead of the females that they wanted to were assigned with. But they're not really exported because they are so endangered. And then we're going to get into why they are so endangered. So the blue duck is classified endangered by the IUCN and is considered nationally endangered by the New Zealand Threat Classification System. And as of 2010, the population is estimated to be only between 2,500 to 3,000, with a maximum of about 12,000 pairs. So the issues with these ducks is part of their habitat and a few other issues. So these guys are very localized species, so they like those mountain areas with fast-flowing water. So that's a big issue because a lot of New Zealand conservation has pretty much been like, let's take all these animals that are hurt by introduced predators and put them on an offshore island where there's none of them so they can survive. There's not many offshore islands with tall mountains and fast-flowing streams for them to live in. Not enough habitat, so basically that's part of the reason why they're kind of endangered as well. But the main reason is introduced predators such as stoats and ferrets and rats and cats and things like that. Competition for its invertebrate prey from trout, which are also introduced. And then the damming of mountain rivers and hydroelectric schemes, so that's another big issue as well. But luckily there's been lots of efforts to try and help them. Things like there's projects sponsored by Genesis Energy, the Central North Island Blue Duck Charitable Conservation Trust, and the Royal Forestry and Bird Protection Service in 2006. And in 2009, they actually started the Department of Conservation started a 10-year recovery program to protect the species in 8 different sites using predator control. So going out and setting traps and killing pests, and to try and establish them as parts of their former range. So female fear are actually particularly vulnerable. So a lot of species, including kokako, because they sit on the nest, they are particularly vulnerable to stoats and things like that. So the population can become skewed. So sometimes you can have a lot more males than females. So the population at some point was actually 70% male. And on average, actually, a clutch of eggs was actually laid on average 9 days before it was destroyed by stoat, and one is actually killed the next day, which is really, really sad. But luckily there's all these projects, as I mentioned, like Feol Forever, all sorts of really cool conservation programs to try and help and protect them. But luckily, as I mentioned, there's predator control. We get Predator 3 2050, all that good stuff to try and help them. Captive breeding, releasing to the wild, all that, so that's going to be helping them. But yeah, as I mentioned, I do work with these guys. Where I work, we do have a pair of Feol. I fed them today. Very, very cute guys. I do love them so very much. And I love talking about New Zealand birds. So thank you, Great Cakes Mod, for making another great New Zealand bird. Definitely a big fan. It's just come out so wonderfully. So awesome. So, yeah, I think this is a great place to end the video. So, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Great Cakes Mods, TNT Leaf, and Patrus, and Tosco, and Scott, and Leaf. You all did a really wonderful job with these mods today, and I really enjoyed talking about them. So, yeah, I really, really, really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified of anything. So, yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.